Kelsey Jensen here. Tonight we are going to be making a Italian garden pasta with Italian garden chicken with Orzo pasta, and then we're going to be making some Gouda Parmesan biscuits to cook up. So kind of a yummy lighter fare. It's only me and the boys today. Both girls are out with friends, so I'm cooking for a small number, which is always a challenge for me because I'm used to cooking for big numbers. So we're gonna put I want to put a generous amount of olive oil in my pan to cook these chicken off because I don't want them to stick so much. So I probably put in about a fourth of a cup because this is a 6-quart saucepan or saute pan. So I need to have a good layer on it. Otherwise the chicken will stick to it. And I do a tad bit more because I wanted to cover the edges. Let's season up our chicken real quick, and then we're going to get it in there to saute. And then we'll pop our orzo in our boiling water, and we'll let it kind of start cooking and make our biscuits here. So I'm just going to give a nice kind of layer of the Italian spices on here, a little bit of onion powder. There we go. And a little bit of garlic salt. Here we go. And I'm going to get a pair of tongs and we're going to flip these over, and then we'll start seasoning up the other side as well, because you always want to season up both sides so we get that nice great flavor on it. Now with these, I am using chicken thighs, which are it's a dark meat, so it's a nice kind of richer meat, but delicious. Here we go. And so we're going to cook these off first until they're kind of cooked all the way through. Then we're going to remove them out of the pan and kind of cook up the rest of our pasta, and then we'll throw them back in at the very end. Here we go. And now got onion powder. So super simple seasoning on here, not too crazy. And then we're going to pop these chicken thighs in, and I'm going to go kind of bottoms down on them. Here we go. And we're going to let them saute up for a good couple minutes and before we flip them. Get the little guy in the middle. Okay, let's put this out of the way. And now let's pour in our orzo pasta. I've got my water boiling nicely, and we're just going to pour in the other half of this bag. I will say a little bit of orzo pasta goes a long way. It really does grow a lot in size. So it seems like I just put a little bit in there, but it's going to be enough for dinner for everyone. Okay, let's start making our biscuits. So let's start with our wet ingredients. I have 3/4 of a cup of whole milk, a stick of butter melted, so a half a cup of butter. There we go. And then we are going to add in a half a cup of sourdough discard for it, since these are a discard recipe. I'm going to pour it in my measuring cup. Right, there we go. I'm going to move this guy out of the way. And we're going to add our discard into our bowl with our milk and our butter. And then we're going to make sure, I'm going to make sure they get kind of diluted together. Pour in the rest. I see a little bit of butter. I want to make sure it all goes into the biscuit. Okay, so let's mix these all together. And I did wait until my butter kind of cooled down so it's not super hot coming out of the microwave.
You have a question? Do you discard every day?
Almost every day. There's occasion when I don't do it. I always try to do it with whatever my recipes are. So I try to use a sourdough discard recipe every day. But again, your starter can go about 3 days on the counter without having to feed it. So you don't have to do it every single day. Here we go. But we are already earlier for my bigger jar of starter. I made waffles, sourdough discard waffles for kind of our brunch today, which was delicious. Turn my chicken down just to a 4 now that it's really sizzling. Okay, now we have our kind of our base mix up here. And I'm going to add my baking soda and baking powder to our biscuit mix. And these are going to be a Parmesan Gouda kind of Italian herb biscuit. And it will play really well with our kind of Italian garden chicken with Orzo pasta.
If you have a question, when you discard, do you have to use it right then?
You don't have to. You can put it in a bowl and use it in your fridge. I know people who also freeze down their discard, but I'm always making so many recipes, so I'm always kind of discarding all the time. So we are going to use a teaspoon of baking soda and then a teaspoon of baking powder. So a little bit of both in this recipe. There we go. And then I'm going to grab my garlic salt over here and my Italian spices. We are going to use a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt, which I think I'll just eyeball in my hand. So a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt, and then about a teaspoon of Italian spices.
Good question. How is Teddy doing?
Today was a rough day for him. Really emotional, and he said lots of ear pain and lots of pain with it. But he has his ups and downs. So we're day 6 of our tonsillectomy. So I'm hoping we're kind of after. I think the next 2 days might be rough because the scabs fall off. But I'm hoping after that we will be on the up and up. Okay, I'm going to mix in my baking powder, my baking soda with this. The baking powder and the baking soda will actually start reacting with that sourdough discard, which makes it a bit more fluffy. There we go. Perfect. And then we're going to add in our flour, and then we'll be ready to add in our cheese at the very end. So we're going to use 2 cups of flour, and I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees for these recipes. So.
Do you ever request to know when you're going to be cooking outside again?
So we haven't been over at my parents' house for a while because Teddy's on an activity restriction for 2 weeks. So maybe next weekend, that will be close to 2 weeks, depending on how he feels, because I just can't take him to my parents' house and then not let him swim in the pool. That would be absolutely torturous for him. So once he's off of his activity restriction, we'll be back over there, because that's just, I can't be like, no, you can't swim while everybody else swims. So we put in our 2 cups of flour, and we're going to mix this until it's just barely mixed. We don't want to over mix it because we want these to be nice, fluffy drop biscuits.
A question: where did you get the flour container?
I got these from Amazon. So I actually have a collection. I put all of my baking stuff in them. Love them. I have them in my Amazon storefront that links on my page. These are great because you can just fill your tubs up, but they also prevent getting pantry moths. And pantry moths, if you've ever had them, you know they're the absolute worst. Okay, so we got our flour in. Now we're going to add in about a cup of cheese, and I'm going to be using half Gouda, half Parmesan cheese. And since I have just a little in each bag, I'm just going to dump it all in, but we're going to say it's about a cup. A cup all together, so not 2 cups, but 1 cup all together. Typically, you would do half Gouda, half Parmesan, but these cheeses I think will play really well with the Italian spices in here. And then we're going to just kind of mix until they're just barely combined in here. And this is going to be our kind of our Gouda Parmesan biscuits that we'll be having with our Italian garden chicken with Orzo pasta. There we go. So these are perfect. Don't overmix. Don't keep mixing and blending. You can have it a little bit of a shag. That is perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to check my chicken real quick, and then we'll shape up our biscuits. Good job. We're getting a pretty decent. I'm going to flip them over now. got a nice kind of crispy sear on that top skin. Now I'm just going to turn it up a little bit now. I didn't want it on super high with the skins because I didn't want to burn the skins, but I'm going to turn it a little bit higher with those, the bottom of the chicken thighs down. So using a parchment lined baking sheet, which will just make it easier for cleanup, I'm going to kind of shape up my biscuits. And I kind of like a little bit bigger biscuits, but I'm not really squeezing them. I'm just doing a kind of a light push together for them. Again, you don't want to mold them so much as you do just kind of patting them together to hold their shape. And I try to keep them roughly the same size. But you know, sometimes I'll get a little wonky towards the end. Now biscuits these are like kind of like a drop biscuit. So again, you don't want to knead them. You don't want to mess with them too much because you want them to be light and fluffy. The more you play with the dough, the firmer it's going to get, and you're going to get a bit of a stiff biscuit. So keep it simple and don't kind of just knead it up. Don't knead it up. Just kind of mix it. And I'm just grabbing like the bits of cheese and whatnot that didn't incorporate because I can just kind of press those in to my biscuits. There we go. Well, it looks like I'm going to make 9 biscuits here, and these will be good sized biscuits. Okay. Give them plenty of room to bake up here. And then we're going to pop these in my oven at 400 for about 18 minutes. And when we're done, after we take them out of the oven, we will brush them with an herby butter to just give them a little extra boost of flavor. So biscuits are in. I'm going to set my timer for 18 minutes. And that way I'll know they're nice and ready. Let me get back. So I'm going to check my orzo here. Orzo, although it's a little pasta, it always takes a lot longer to cook than you think. It's not done like super quick. Yeah, I can already tell just by the feel of them and their look, they still need a little bit more time. Cooking up nicely. I'm going to kind of rest that one. Okay, we're going to let those cook for a little bit longer while we start prepping up our vegetables for the next part of our thing. So I'm going to use the first part of my green onions in the beginning. We'll saute them up to bring out some nice flavor. And then we'll finish it off with the greener part of my green onions towards the end. So I'm just going to kind of cut that pale green part and that white part off. And then, let's see, we'll do my zucchini first. So we're going to cut off the tops and bottom of our zucchini here. And then I'm going to quarter them so that my zucchini isn't super overpowering in the pasta. That way you just have little bits, here and there spread throughout. And then just gonna slice them, not super thin. I want a good kind of base to them because if you cut them too thin, they'll get mushy and they won't hold their shape. So cut them with a decent amount of, of the base on it. There we go. We'll get these kind of cut up. And now I'm going to turn this guy down just a little bit. And check on our chicken, see how it's cooking. Looking good. Beautiful. I'm going to try to lean that one on the side because it has a bit of side skin that I want to sear up for it. Perfect. I'll let them flip over again. We're going to fry up on the other side a bit more, add a bit more heat. And I like using chicken thighs with this recipe because that meat is such a juicy, tender meat. But you could definitely use a breast in here and just kind of cut them up into chunks and then saute them off. Okay, we've got our zucchini here. Let's get our green onions there. Now we are going to get our mushrooms sliced up. So these are baby bellas, and I'm just going to slice them nice and thin. You could always buy pre-sliced mushrooms at the store, but I find that mushrooms stay better if you buy them whole. And what my trick to prevent them from getting slimy is once I buy them whole, I take off that plastic wrap that they're in, and I find that they keep much better when they're exposed to the air versus where they trap all that moisture in. It prevents them from getting that slimy or mold on them. There we go. I'll slice these guys. And then I'm going to pull out a piece of orzo and we'll test it, see if it's ready. Now, I cook my orzo to about right at al dente because you don't want to cook it too soft because you're going to be putting it in the mixture with the sand. So it's going to suck up a little extra juice and flavor at the end. Still a bit firm to touch. Like I said, orzo takes a lot longer than people think. It's a tiny pasta, so naturally you think it's going to cook really fast, but it does not. Okay, we got our mushrooms.
No question. What do you store your mushrooms in?
So I keep them typically in the same container that they are in. I just take off that thing, and then when it's time to use them, I'll wash them and have them ready. But just the container that they're in, I just peel it off, and you can always put a paper towel over them as well to kind of keep a little bit of that moisture out. Okay, I'm gonna check my chicken, but we'll probably start pulling off some of our chicken here. Yeah, it feels pretty firm to me. Now, when I remove this chicken, it is going to continue cooking on the plate because of that residual heat, but we will also be putting it back in at the end and we'll be letting it cook. But it should be all cooked through right now. But that is also one thing that's nice about chicken, like cooking this meal. As it sits, it will continue to cook because of that residual heat.
You have a question? Do mushrooms need to be stored in the fridge?
Yes, I always store mine in the fridge. Now, I don't know if that's a must, but I've always done it. I think, I don't know. I don't actually know whether you could or not, but I know you can, grow mushrooms on the side. Okay, let's get these. I put my green onions in, my white part of my green onions. And then I'm going to add in, there's my garlic. I got my garlic here. You could use fresh garlic. I'm going to use kind of a heaping spoonful. So about a teaspoon and a half. It's going to add a nice little flavor. I'm going to let this saute up for just a minute before we add in our, I'm going to do my mushrooms first because they have a little bit of a lower liquid content than the zucchini. And when I put the zucchini in, they're going to sweat out, and I want to be able to get a nice kind of sear on my mushrooms. Here we go. So it doesn't take long for the garlic to kind of cook up. You want to put your vegetables in pretty quick because it can go from like frying up to burning really quickly. So we'll put our mushrooms in, and we're going to let these give them a nice stir. Mushrooms are very porous. So they're going to pick up that flavor really quickly and that oil. So you just want to make sure you coat them all the way around so they completely get coated and not just one side of your mushroom gets kind of covered in that oil. And don't worry, so I fried off my chicken in the beginning, and as you can see, we have little bits on our pan. We want those bits there. Those are going to add flavor at the end when we kind of deglaze it with a little bit of our starchy water and some chicken bouillon. And deglazing simply means when we pour that liquid in, we'll scrape at that, all those stuff will come off, and they will add a lot of flavor and body to our sauce. So I'm going to spread my mushrooms out. So they all have their own time on the pan. I've got my stove heat cooking over like a medium high. I'm at about almost a 7, but not quite a 7. And now we'll put our zucchini in next, but I'm going to prep up my tomatoes here. So I've got about, I want to say, a cup and a half of cherry tomatoes here. These are tiki tomatoes, and I'm going to use them in our sauce as well. But they'll add a nice little pop of acid. And I also have some tomato paste that will help make a really nice, rich base to the sauce. And so I'm going to cut them in half because cherry tomatoes, when they cook up, they'll pop if they get really hot inside. And we don't need exploding tomatoes in here cooking, especially when they heat up really, really fast. So I'm going to just cut them in half, and then they'll be great. They'll also let out their juices nicely, and that will help kind of season our things. But we're going to add them in after we add the zucchini because I want the zucchini to be able to sear up as well. There we go. If you're finding that your knife is sliding when you're trying to cut a tomato, all you have to do is sharpen up your knife. And if you don't have a honing steel or whatnot, then I recommend using a serrated knife to cut tomatoes because having that jagged edge helps get a grip on it and cut a little bit better. Okay. Just a few more left in here, but tomatoes, I feel like this is a great recipe you can do if your garden is flourishing, if you have lots of tomatoes or zucchini growing, and basil, because we're going to be using some fresh basil in a little bit, but this is a great recipe for that.
So question, how is your garden going?
It is actually going really, really well. I've got a whole bunch of tomatoes that are going to be coming in soon. So I just looked out there, and I think I counted 30 or 40 tomatoes. So they're all green right now. So far, I've harvested 3 tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, and a pepper. But it is all coming. And I always say my garden, I feel pops off more in July, end of July, August. Because I do plant it a little bit later, I'm always running out of time, and I'm by the time the middle to end of April comes, I'm I gotta plant it. Okay, I'm gonna stir my mushrooms. This is part of our veggie base for our Italian garden chicken pasta, which we'll be having with orzo. I'm going to throw in my zucchini, and I'll give them a good stir around. We want them to kind of pick up these nice flavors on the pan. We seared off our chicken already in here, and once our veggies are kind of cooked off, we'll create our sauce base, and we'll throw our chicken back in to get nice and flavored with it. I'm going to check my orzo here in just a second as well, see where we're sitting on, if it's done. Perfect. We've got that nice little tenderness. Before I get rid of my broth, I want to use a little bit of this starchy water for my pasta sauce. I don't need this whole much. I only need about a cup, but the starchy water is better than using regular water because it's going to act as a natural thickener. So I always just ladle a little bit off. I'm going to catch a few orzo in here. Let me turn off. Maybe it won't be as starchy and bubbly. go. I'm trying not to catch too many orzo. Although, all it's the same. I'll say orzo is one of those ones where you can use it in a soup and it doesn't get too soggy. There we go. That's about good.
Do you salt your pasta water?
Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. If I'm typically using it, I would. I forgot to salt it today, but when I'm using the starchy water in my base, I usually salt it because it adds a bit more flavor. But if I'm just cooking up the pasta on its own, I typically don't because of the sauce will have lots of flavor in it. So I'm going to give it a good little shake here. And word to the wise, when you are using orzo, do not use a colander with big slits or you're going to lose half of your orzo. So I'm using a fine mesh one with this so it doesn't kind of go out. That orzo is still going to get a little bit bigger when it soaks up the juices, but it's kind of that perfect blend where you want a little bit of pasta, but your whole dish isn't pasta. And I love orzo for that because it kind of, you can use it as a place of like a rice, almost in a sense. It tastes just like pasta, even though it looks like rice. Okay, our zucchini is looking pretty fantastic here. I've got some nice browning on it. So before I add in my tomatoes, I'm going to add in some tomato paste. Tomato paste in a tube is awesome because you can use a little bit of it and then you can screw the lid back on and store it in your fridge. It's not like a can where then you have like a can without a lid on it in your fridge. I used about a tablespoon of this, and this is going to add a nice kind of richness, a richer tomato flavor to it. We are using our halved tomatoes, but this is going to give you just a slightly richer flavor. I'm going to saute that up just a little bit right now, and then we'll add in our tomatoes. But I always like to let that have a little bit of time on the pan. And you can see it's already starting to deglaze. That zucchini is letting out the water, and those bits on the bottom are starting to come off. Once we add the tomatoes in, a lot more of that will come off as well. But when we add our final little bit of chicken broth in with that starchy water we're going to make it, we'll get a lot of the rest of that off. Here we go. So we've got our halved tomatoes. Going to really kind of stir them around. And then we're going to let them kind of sit and cook. Using my starchy water, I have a little bit of chicken bouillon left in here. You just need about a teaspoon. It's going to add a lot of flavor to it, especially help pick up on the chicken. So I'm going to...
So you have a quick question. Can you use pasta sauce instead of tomato paste?
You could, but you'd have to use a bit more pasta sauce because it's not going to be quite as rich. So tomato paste is essentially tomato sauce that has been reduced all the way down into a paste, so all of that liquid is out. So then it takes the natural liquids in your food to rehydrate it, so you get a lot more tomato flavor with a lot less liquid. Okay, so I'm mixing my chicken bouillon in here. I use a spoonful. And then because I am not one to waste it, I'm going to pour a little bit of this warm water in here and shake it up. But you want it about like a heaping teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of chicken bouillon. Just shake it around, get the rest of that. And this is going to add a nice extra layer of chicken flavor. And that starchy water is going to help make a really velvety sauce. We will be adding in some half and half, but this will add a whole nother flavor.
Question. Were the mushrooms and zucchini seasoned already?
So I have not seasoned them yet. I'm going to season them here in just a second. We did have some spices already on the bottom of our pan from when we cooked our chicken. We had those Italian spices in there. I don't like to season my vegetables up until the end. We had garlic in there, so that doesn't count, because those spices can stick to the bottom of your pan and burn. Because they're drier. So I like to wait until we have a little bit more flavor. And now we're going to add in some more Italian spices. I've got in here about a teaspoon and a half left. So we're going to use just the rest of this. It's going to give it a nice kind of kick. I do have some fresh parsley and basil, and then of course the green onion tips that we will add in, but we will add those towards the end because they lose their flavor the more you cook with them. So now we're going to kind of pour these spices in, and we're going to let them kind of rehydrate into our tomatoes, zucchinis, and mushrooms, which is looking gorgeous. And once we add in our chicken bouillon, we will, after we do that, we'll test the saltiness of our things. But right now, our biscuits are beeping. So we are going to grab them out. And look at these beautiful biscuits made with Gouda and Parmesan cheese, Italian spices, and garlic salt, and a half a cup of our sourdough discard. They are looking gorgeous. I'm going to melt up a little bit of butter to brush with some garlic salt to brush over the top of them to give them a little bit more, another pop of flavor. I'm going to put in about a tablespoon and a half of butter in my little pan, and we'll melt that up. And then we'll brush these biscuits over with that flavors, which will pair really well with that Gouda and Parmesan cheese. And we kind of did an Italian theme on the biscuit, so that Italian spices will pair really well with our dinner.
You have a question? Do you make traditional sourdough bread regularly?
I do. I typically make a traditional loaf once or twice a week on there, and then we do some specialty loaves around, like, you know, different things. So I do make it in the fall and winter. I tend to make it a lot more because we eat a lot of soups, and I make a lot of grilled cheese sandwiches or grilled like melts. So in the summer, I do like a bigger variety of things, but I feel like the winter and the fall, I'm like making sourdough every single day. It just kind of, you know, certain cuisines play really well with a nice big hearty slice of bread. Okay, I'm gonna pour, I've got my chicken bouillon here. I'm gonna pour it in right here in the middle, and I'm gonna start scraping at those chicken bits that are stuck on the bottom of the pan. That's gonna bring up a lot of flavor. Do you see how, this is called deglazing, and do you see how all of those spices that were stuck down on the bottom of the pan are coming off? And how, even though we added so far just a half a cup, we've already got a nice, rich, thick sauce. And that's because we use that starchy water. And now, don't just pour all of your liquid in at once. Add it in slowly, because sometimes you need a little more or a little less. But you don't want to over dilute it with the liquid. Here we go. So I'm going to pour the rest of that in. We're going to give it a nice little stir around. And now I'm going to taste it for its saltiness level, because I want to make sure now's the time to add a bit more salt if I need it. But I wanted to make sure that chicken broth was in first. No, I don't think we need any more. That chicken broth kind of covered it. Okay, we're going to add in our, turn it down just a smidge. I'm going to actually put my chicken back in here. Actually, let me throw my orzo in first, and then we'll do our chicken. But I'm going to turn it down low because we don't need to kind of cook on high. Don't worry if your orzo has clumped together because it's starchy mess. That sauce will cause it to all come apart. So once it hits the sauce in here, it's going to pick up those flavors and it will break apart. So you don't need to coat it with oil or anything like that. There we go. And that's why you also want to cook it to about al dente or just right before, because it is going to pick up these flavors in the sauces. And if you cook it too much, it will then be mushy. So, but you can see how that orzo completely filled up and we have so much here. Okay, let me turn off my back burner. My butter is ready over here. Here's my garlic salt. I'm going to add a little bit of garlic salt to this. Just about a half a teaspoon. You don't need a lot. but it will add just this kind of nice little salty crunch on the top of your biscuit. And then we're just going to brush this over the top. Beautiful. And this just adds a whole, just makes your biscuit so much better. It's like those biscuits at the Cheddar Bay ones at Red Lobster. This is kind of a variation of it that I use. I make this kind of biscuit level, but I can change out the cheeses and my spices to just change it up to what we're eating. So I kind of did Italian theme this way with the Gouda, Parmesan, and Italian spices. Here we go. And this is, again, I used about 1.5 tablespoons of butter here that we're kind of brushing over the top with a little bit of garlic salt in there. Okay, let's get our cream in here.
No question. Do you use garlic powder instead of garlic salt?
I use garlic salt, and I use garlic salt in place of garlic powder and salt. I find garlic powder can be a bit grainy, so I don't like to use like salt and garlic powder mixed together. I just love my garlic salt, and it's not quite as salty as regular salt. I'm going to add in about 1/2 cup. This is half and half. You can also use cream for an even richer one if you wanted, but I'm all out of cream in my house, so half and half it is. And that's going to kind of make these this pasta kind of mellow out a little bit. Those spices kind of groove together. And then we're going to place our chicken in here. And then we'll chop up the rest of our kind of our herbs that we have and put them in there as well. And you want this to kind of soak in there, pick up those delicious flavors. So scoop it around, kind of marinate. And now for my herbs, my finishing herbs, I'm using green onions, parsley, and fresh basil. I get it all. Slide this over here. I do have my cooking on very low heat. That way it will kind of soak up even more of those flavors into the chicken. There we go. So these are the green parts of my green onions. We already sauteed up the whiter parts when we made our vegetable base for this, our pasta. So got my basil here. I'm going to mince it up nice and fine. And these ones we're going to add at the very end because if you cook them up, they kind of lose all of their flavor. So if you add them towards the end, you're still going to get that nice bright bite of flavor from them. There we go. So a nice small mince. And then I've got my parsley here. I'm going to just move any big stalks. This is flat Italian parsley, which I actually kind of like a little bit better in cooking than the curly leaf parsley because it's a bit more tender. I feel like the curly leaf parsley sometimes can be a bit chewy. And parsley is one of those things that once it gets cooked, it's got no flavor whatsoever, but fresh, it has a nice little bit of flavor. There we go. So now I'm just going to put my whole melody here, and we're just going to chop it all up. Again, nice fine minces. That way you don't have any really big leaves or bits. Okay. We're going to take our fresh herbs, sprinkle them all the way around. And that when you scoop up your serving, you'll have them right there to mix in, and they'll still have their nice, really fresh flavors. Okay, guys, we are just about ready to serve up our dinner. Okay, let me just slide this over here. Okay, so for dinner tonight, we are going to have our Italian garden chicken with orzo pasta. This Here's our chicken thigh that we seasoned with Italian spices, onion powder, and garlic salt. And then we have our orzo veggie pasta made with cherry tomatoes, mushrooms, zucchini, and then we also use tomato paste, Italian spices, and garlic salt to season that up. We will serve it with our delicious biscuit. This is a Gouda and Parmesan biscuit with Italian spices brushed with butter. And then, of course, as with any pasta, we're going to top it off with a little bit of shaved Parmesan cheese to add that nice extra little pop of delicious cheesiness. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on the page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, all you have to do is go to the link on our page, search for what we cooked for. So chicken, our Italian garden chicken and orzo pasta, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our cooking gadgets, baking sheets, and all that jazz in there. I have even my 6-quart pan in there. So if you're interested in what cooking stuff we use, I have that all there for you as well. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.